Why? Are these elections officials? I mean, I can only think of two alternatives. One, it is a unintentional result of not performing their jobs, or it is a deliberate act to subvert the outcome of elections. And I just don't know how you can create a conspiracy to come up with 10 million illegal votes and have everybody in on it. So how does this happen? And then I've got to, well, I'll save the other question. Let's focus on that one for now.
Let me talk about this issue about what could the cause be, and is it deliberate or is it inadvertent? In 1888, the United States Supreme Court ruled in a case called In Re Coy that when an election official fails to follow the law, that is criminal intent. Now, I'm going to just help you understand how that context is created a little bit because it's radical. It's very different than any other kind of fraud, right? It's not like securities fraud or contract fraud where you have to actually prove an intentional malice. Election officials are recognized as being the arbiters of what is fundamentally a peace treaty in the United States of America between political factions. When our elections are not basically pure as the driven snow, then factions have legitimate reason to distrust each other and to distrust in a system that they feel slowly more and more disenfranchised by. Because the idea of America is that everyone has a seat at the table. And by forcing everyone to the table who's interested in participating in the democratic process, we get better outcomes for everybody because everybody has to prove their case. So when the election officials either, even if they're ignorant of the law, when they take this job, they accept the responsibility to know the law and to administer this election process faithfully to the law. So when they don't, the United States Supreme Court and standing law in the US says that's criminal intent because they've now disrupted continuity of governance. They've disrupted trust in our democratic institutions and processes. And they may, in fact, have allowed a private interest to enter our hallowed halls of the United States Congress and operate on an illegitimate basis outside the interests of their constituents, their lawful constituents. So this is not just an arcane decision from 1888 that United Sovereign Americans has found and dragged out. This is cited in the current edition of the United States Department of Justice guidebook, Federal Prosecution of Election Offenses. This is good law because there's no other way to hold this country in balance with the massive, diverse representations of political factions, political ideas, political outcomes, and the trillions and trillions of American taxpayer dollars that hang in the balance.
Well, it's good law, but it's only good law if there are judges willing to enforce it. And from my observations, that is one of the big challenges that we have. Have you found any judges with the courage to actually read and enforce the laws that you're quoting?
Yes, in fact, this has happened many times in the last 150 years of election litigation in the United States. Again, what happened after
I'm
2020
really
was almost,
focused on the last 2 to 4 years.
well, let me help you understand why we're having these obstacles because almost every lawsuit that has challenged an election since 2020 has challenged the election outcome. So that creates a different bar of evidence that has to be overcome. It's a completely different standard of evidence, and it's extraordinarily difficult to do. And there's a good reason. The people of the several states shall choose their representatives, not judges. So when a judge is put in the position of having to adjudicate an election outcome, the judge is going to do everything in his or her power to get rid of that political football because it is a hot potato and it is not their area of expertise or jurisdiction. What has worked dozens and dozens of times in American history is challenging the process of administering the election. And in fact, this was the original challenge in Bush v. Gore. It had nothing to do with election outcome. The lawsuit initially hinged on whether or not these dimpled ballots had been uniformly counted across the state of Florida, and it was discovered they had not. And when the recount was forced of these dimpled ballots, the election outcome changed. So I want to talk about two cases. There's one called USB Classic from 1941, and there's another one called USB Anderson from 1973. In both of these cases, based on the principle of a fundamental civil rights deprivation acting under color of law, state election officials who certified falsified tallies went to federal prison on the basis of protecting the right of the citizens of those jurisdictions to have a fairly counted election. And these cases were appealed. Classic was appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they didn't even blink. They just affirmed the lower court's ruling. No, these people go to federal prison. We don't care. This is what happens. And in the case of Anderson, it was a single polling site involving a handful of ballots where the tally that was certified was falsified on the basis of only one single polling site and only a handful of ballots. And these officials went to federal prison.
I got it. But you're going back to 1941 and 1973. What about in the last 2 to 4 years?
No election challenges have been filed on this basis. No one has argued civil rights. That's how you win.
In the case of Fulton or Jefferson Satir versus the Fulton Board of Elections, we did actually argue civil rights or a one-off. We argued a 14th Amendment lack of due process and equal protection under the law, which is in effect civil rights. And our judge was going with us for 9 months. He was ruling in our favor. Brian Amaro in Henry County, Georgia, Superior Court judge. And then he actually ruled that we had demonstrated a prima facie case. Bob Shealy and Charles Bundren, the lawyers on the case. I was tangentially involved in fundraising and communications. And the judge ordered the absentee ballots unsealed. He was agreeing with us and then just whipsawed. His whole personality and demeanor changed, and he threw the case out for standing. 9 months after it was initiated, we had argued standing in the first 2 weeks. That's my concern. It appears that something very serious is going on. And my other concern, while I'm on a roll, we talked about registration, voting, counting, and then recording. If you get all three of those rights, I am very concerned about the recording of the ballots, because we can see from the Edison data that CISA was responsible for recording, that the tallies changed in the middle of the night. And we saw huge shifts in votes for Trump being decremented and Biden tallies at 2 a.m. being increased. And we're told that there's nothing there, don't look there, there's nothing to see. And if you do, you're some wild conspiratorialist. Now, just help me understand, how are we going to do it differently in a month?
I think the world of Charles Bundren. He's really a very dedicated attorney, and I'm not surprised to hear about this case. I didn't know about this case directly. I've never read it, so I'll have to get the link from you or get the documents from you. But I'm sure on the basis of what you've told me already that it was extremely well argued, and it sounds like there was some kind of interference with its adjudication, and that is sadly going on in many courts in this country. And what I will say is not that I have a crystal ball or a magic wand any more than Bundren or anybody else in this country has that. What I will say is that United Sovereign Americans is ready and in position to take this to the mat in federal court all over the country. And everything you just said about the machine systems, for example, can be summarized in a single sentence. They have not been properly certified, and illegally, the information that enters the black box of the voting system is known and supposed to be transparent to the American people. But what comes out the other side, so the actual process of counting is totally obscured in an illegal maneuver that allowed, independent software companies basically to hide their counting process as a matter of intellectual property. And that's simply not a constitutional decision. So all of that is incorporated into our legal challenges. And, I understand your concern. I will say with the 9 lawsuits we have already filed and the lawsuits we're currently preparing, because again, what we've done is preposition automatic standing to file for injunctive relief before these elections could possibly be certified. That's some of what we're preparing, and we're also preparing civil rights actions that charge election officials directly with deprivation of civil rights acting under color of law when they do certify these fraudulent elections or these unreliable elections as a matter of law. And again, not only have election officials been put in federal prison for these offenses in the past, but they have also been sued personally. And that has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court because the right to vote is not in the Bill of Rights. It is within the original Constitution. And so their official immunity is stripped when they take this position. Again, it's not that this is going to be easy. It's just that what other remedy do we have? What other pathway, peaceful pathway to do everything in our power to enforce the law in federal courts across this country than to pursue this strategy that is based on standing precedent and based on clear law about election misconduct?
And my hat's off to you. I commend you with every fiber of gratitude I have in my body for what you are doing. I think it is an uphill battle, but we will never get there if we don't try. And 9 lawsuits and more to come. And you figured out how the game is played. And so you're being proactive and you're eliminating the possibility that the court can say, you're barred by latches and estoppel because you should have told us before when you had the information and didn't do anything. So I totally understand the strategy, and I think you're absolutely dead on the way that you're approaching it. I just hope that the judges in this country will rise to the occasion and consider the Constitution and the rule of law and honor the oath that they took to enforce these laws, because our freedoms and our country are in the balance, and it is a grave responsibility they have. And I will say this as we wrap up, I do think 2024 will be different from 2020 in that in 2020 we were really blindsided and caught by surprise. And they had COVID working to their advantage, so they had all these lock boxes, all these absentee ballots. And this year, you've got Trump out there saying, let's overwhelm the votes so that they can't cheat. I just read this morning where Philadelphia, of all places, is starting to look like there are more young people and non-traditional Republicans that are voting for Trump. Even Philadelphia might be contributing towards a red state in Pennsylvania for this presidential election. So,
Do you know that Queens, New York is one of the most Republican counties in America?
yes.
This is a total gaslight about New York City, Philadelphia, any of these big cities. We're being gaslighted really hard. And that shows up in the state's official records. So, I want to talk about one quick thing, John, before we sign off here. I want everyone to know that there is a very, very important way every American can help make sure these lawsuits get over the finish line. And that is an issue, a challenge that we have, which is we have to have real time evidence that the elections don't meet the standard of reliability as a matter of law, which means we need citizens not ranting on Facebook when you have trouble voting or when you get a ballot sent to your address that, for a person who doesn't live there. Don't rant on Facebook. No attorney general is required to investigate your Facebook post. Go to unite4freedom.com, unite4freedom.com, and fill out our 2024 election complaint form. You are going to send your form to your chief election official and your attorney general for your state, and you're going to send it to the attorney general for the United States of America, and you are going to give United Sovereign Americans a copy. And we are going to give you, there's a 3-minute video on our election complaint page that shows you how easy it is to do this. We have made it absolutely as simple as you can imagine. But if you do not give us those experiences you're having when you go out, like John was saying, hey, the machine suddenly didn't work in Republican districts, or the Republicans were sent to different polling sites, and when they got to those polling sites, the poll workers told them they had to vote provisionally. If these happen to you, report it in an official manner, force the election officials to investigate your problem, or force them to be exposed for not bothering to investigate more mistakes in the counting of ballots than Congress allows by law. And most states, all we have to do is generate, 50 to 75 errors in the counting of ballots statewide. Can you guys give us 1,000 for every state? Can you give us 5,000 per state? Let's do this together. File your official election misconduct report with United Sovereign Americans and file it with the officials who have to investigate.
And again, that's the Attorney General, the elections official, which in many states is the Secretary of State, and the U.S. Attorney General. They all have websites. They all have ways you can communicate with them. So,
No, we're going to give you, when you go to that election complaint form, you're going to have the easiest instructions. We have everything prepared for you. You'll receive it all in an email specific to your state when you fill out the form with your personal experience about what happened to you. Why are you filling out this complaint? It's as easy as pie. It's going to take you minutes, probably about twice as long as your Facebook post, but you will help save your country.
Marly, thank you so much. I would imagine these 9 lawsuits and the others that are contemplated, and the website and the complaint forms that you've streamlined a process to handle, cost a lot of money. Where's your funding coming from, and what can listeners do that want to be a part of what you're doing?
They can help. Everybody can help. If you do have extra money, I know that we're all struggling right now with that, but this is all funded by small donors. And every $10 that gets sent in is extremely appreciated. If you donate $100 through usaforfreedom.com, you'll get a free t-shirt with the eagle logo, beautiful t-shirt. So if you can give $100, we'll be happy to reciprocate with a beautiful shirt. But yeah, we really need your help.
So members of our live stream can see the uniteforfreedom.com on your screen, but the radio audience doesn't have that advantage, and that's where the majority of our viewership, listenership is. So it is Unite, the number 4, Freedom, uniteforfreedom.com. You can donate there. You can register your elections complaints or concerns there. And you can also communicate with Marly Hornik, one of the premier election integrity experts in the country. Together, we can make this happen. Marly, I just flat out want to put you out of business, but I think you're going to have some job security for some time to come. But hopefully, this dark period in the American history where elections are shaped and manipulated will come to an end. And when that happens, you can look back with pride for having been a force in making that occur. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and keep fighting.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.